This is LaRouche Pack Saturday Night Class Series. My name's Tony Pappard. I'm with LaRouche Pack in Detroit. And today's class is by Miwa Steger. It's the second in a series called Beethoven's Triumph Over Death. And she's exploring Beethoven's Opus 111 piano sonata. In the last class, she's situated it and discussed the first movement. This class, she's going to discuss the second movement. So I think with no more ado, why don't I hand it over to Miwa, okay. And we can start. Go ahead.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome back, or in some cases, welcome for the first time. If you were with us last week or you've been with us before, thank you for joining us. So my name is Miwa Steger, and as Tony stated, we have been investigating Beethoven's last piano sonata, Opus 111, number 32. And it's significant based on what we discussed last week. So let me just sort of set the tone and bring people maybe that weren't with us last week up to speed in a sense of where we are. So in last week's presentation, the first movement of Opus 111 was situated in what I would say was a major feature of the presentation, which was the Heiligenstadt Testament that Beethoven wrote in 1802 to his brothers, Karl and Johann. And that is available online if people want to read it, 1802 Heiligenstadt Testament. And what we discussed in the context of that, having read that, is really situating ourselves in the arc of history, situating ourselves in the arc of the development of human civilization. And where do we place ourselves? Where do we place ourselves on the stage of history? Because that's not clear. It's not clear when we're born what that's going to be or how that's going to unfold. We are given a profound opportunity and potential through the life that we were given to figure out how to use the talent that we were given by God. And we really started last week by saying, we're actually going to be embarking upon the discovery of God through Beethoven, and the joy and celebrating that kind of joy of God through Beethoven, because Beethoven is one of God's creatures that really shaped the scope of human civilization. So that's really where we situated it. Opus 111 is I mean, you sort of you have no words to describe it. You have to get into the composition and find out what the kind of breakthroughs were that were made specifically by Beethoven. And for me personally, this has been quite a journey. And some may think that this is just something that's been a recent journey, but for me personally, this is at least a 25 to 30-year journey, because when I was in school, in music school, I graduated in 1999 from music school, and I didn't work on Beethoven until my later years, because majority of my beginning years was steeped in Bach. And thankfully, my teachers, I had one teacher that was consistent up through high school, and then one professor that knew me through high school, but then also was my professor through music school. And so there was a consistency there. But being steeped in Bach, I was essentially prepared to be able to mature into understanding or gaining an insight into Beethoven. And it was my last really 3 years in music school that I studied Opus 109 and 110 intensively. So there has been a suspension of time since 1999, but then I joined the LaRouche movement. And from there, these ideas completely took off. It was a completely new universe to me, which I hope to impart to many of you, because it was a discovery that I made that completely changed my sense of identity of what I had been before and what I was going to be. And it continues on to this day. It's a living process. Because creativity is a living process. It really doesn't ever have to end. And so that this long arc of suspension is now coming to a certain, not close, but as I said in the email that I sent out, these sort of conclusions or resolutions are in essence a beginning of something new. That may be a novel idea to many people, especially when they think about something like death, which is something all of us are going to have to confront at one point or another, or all of us have confronted at one point or another. And to see it and understand it from that kind of perspective, when you realize, well, if you used your talent well, if you used it in the living image of God, then you have everything to look forward to in terms of what comes after you. And we're in that kind of moment now, where I think more and more people in the American population want a sense of a profound, they want their existence to be profound. They want to be a part of something historical and profound. And we are in that moment now. And we are in a war to really save this country from the depths of despair. Many of the people in our population have really experienced levels of despair that you really, can only imagine to some extent. And that there is a remedy to that. There is a balm for that. And it's not just music per se, but it's the kind of classical, it's the kind of compositional, creative breakthrough that when you are given the opportunity to relive that, which is what I said last week, is the curriculum for young children has to be completely steeped and immersed in this, in the action of rediscovery of profound ideas that shaped mankind. So that being said, I mean, if you think about my generation now, I'm in my mid-40s, and I think one thing I do have to mention is there's a certain quality within the culture of sentimentality. And to be honest, many of the people within positions of leadership, President Trump is a boomer. Many of our educational professors are from this boomer generation. I think President Trump is one of the best of this generation. I know many other that are quality, the best of that generation in particular. But there is a cultural dynamic of sentimentality, meaning, what do I mean by that? I mean, well, there's this idea that we want to go back to when times were good, when times were better, and that did happen. I can speak for myself, my generation. We don't have a lot to look back on that was wonderful. That was great. And I mean, okay, yeah, maybe some things in the 1980s were a little bit more wholesome than what you get today, but they were nowhere near profound, and they were nowhere near the kind of breakthroughs that would really catapult mankind into the future. The space program was completely decimated. The financial system went completely berserk, as we're getting a sense of today. We're getting the effects of that today. So the reason why I bring this up is because the point of what we discussed last week in discovering what our purpose is, what our place in history is, if we're given access to that, that means you're not thinking about preserving a time, standing still, or preserving a time when it was good, but that you really have a desire to constantly live for the future. And Beethoven is a prime example of somebody that was completely devoted to the future and what he could contribute for the future, as was the case in the Heiligenstadt Testament. That was a testament to his devotion to the future generations, and to give all that he had through God for those generations. And so that's why it's so special for us to be able to participate in something like this together. We could have more of this out in society. I think there are artists that are out there that are doing this, and bringing the population in, bringing their audiences in to a scope of history, and an insight into the kind of genius that can be generated from a love of mankind. So I think so that really kind of sets the stage as a welcome to you. What we're going to do now is I'd like to dive into the second movement of Beethoven's Opus 111. And perhaps I'll go through the very beginning. And I've had a chance to listen to some recordings. I remembered some, because people last week asked about respectable and good recordings that I could recommend, and it didn't really come to me. The only thing that came to me was Andras Schiff, who I still hold as the height of any living pianist right now. But so the beginning of 111, what I realized in listening to different recordings, Geza Anda, I can give people a whole list of people, Peter Serkin, Sviatoslav Richter, these individuals, pianists, Daniel Barenboim. One thing I noticed was that if they didn't get the beginning, if they weren't able to set the tone and the stage for the unfolding of this entire composition, and it's not a lengthy composition, it's actually the only two movement sonata within the last triad, which is the Opus 109, 110, and 111, which Beethoven conceived of as a unit. He worked on them simultaneously, and really just, he didn't have this idea of a separate movements of sonata or separate sonatas. So the beginning of it really lays the foundation for a drama to unfold. And so let me just play the very beginning. So I'll stop there. So that sets the stage. And we can get into this in the question and answer if people want to jot down, to come back to this and remind me that I had some certain thoughts on different performers, and it really, because it's the principle of the lunge, because what we're doing as artists, as people that have an intention, there's really egotistical performers out there, but for many of us, we have an intention of bringing people into a process of experience and discovery, and it's a living process. And Beethoven, especially within his latter compositions, makes a significant breakthrough in terms of just compositional elements, and you'll see what I mean when we get into the second movement. But let me just say, let me just preface the second movement and us going through it by saying that Beethoven really becomes, within the course of his life and within the course of his own self-development, becomes he is a visionary. And as I said before, I can't really state it enough, is that this idea of living for the future, that means something. It doesn't mean enough to people nowadays, but we can get there. That's what we're attempting to do, to make that a part of our language in the world. And so Beethoven, he's specifically like a rhythmic visionary. What he does with elements of rhythm and modality rise completely outside of the realm of senses, because many people think that music has to do with what you hear. You hear music with your ears. Certainly that's a part of it. You do hear what's happening with your ears. But what's happening with the human mind when, for instance, from the beginning of a lunge through the resolution, that's something unique to the human mind. That's something unique that does make us in the living image of God. The closest, unmediated relationship of any species to God is really the human mind. And through the course of unfolding of a composition like that, you're able to, it's not about a retention or a memory, but you have the capacity within your mind to suspend all that has happened. And what happens at the end of a composition is your mind has just been involved in a concentration of conceptual activity that continues to transcend to higher and higher levels, which really take you out of the realm of the senses. And that is truly an ultimate goal. I wouldn't say it's the ultimate goal, but it is a main feature of what it means to be an artist or to be an educated listener or audience. So you really are your mind is able to subsume the entire process throughout the course of its unfolding. So let's get into the second movement. And I will, so you heard the beginning. All right, so I'm trying to figure out where to start. I'm gonna start with the end of the first movement, and I'll go right into the second movement. Now, I just to mention, Beethoven has very specific markings. The marking of the first movement is maestoso. allegro con brio ed appassionato. So it's majestic. So he that at the beginning of what you heard. He describes that as majestic. That's the tone that he wants. And then when he gets into the development section of the first movement, which we heard. He states that as allegro con brio ed appassionato. So quickly, with briskness and passion. So you're not really lacking that when you're playing that. So I just wanted to set that tone and make that known. So we're going to start somewhere towards the end of the first movement, and I will go right into the second movement and stop and come back to you. So oh, sorry. That was the beginning of those the second movement. Beethoven identifies, he calls this an arietta, and he puts adagio molto semplice e cantabile. So arietta is, I mean, some people think of it as a diminutive, but it's not. It's a what he begins here in the second movement is a theme and variations. So many, you may know theme and variations where you set a theme, you state a theme, and however many variations that come after the statement of the theme, usually in the traditional sense of theme and variations, you can hear the theme throughout the course of the variations. It's very identifiable. One composition that many may know is Avu dirais maman by Mozart, or in other words, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, the variations on Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. I don't remember how many variations Mozart composed, but you can hear within that composition, you can hear the relationship of the theme within the variations. Beethoven, this is characterized as theme and variations, but he completely breaks the just the boundary of what that means, what a theme and variation means. He does set the beginning, the first, I think, two or three, the first three variations. You hear this theme, and you do hear it at the end. But when you travel through everything that Beethoven does throughout the course of this movement, you realize you're hearing something similar, but in a completely different way. So he really there's a transcendental quality to this composition. So let me just play that, and then I'm going to play the development of the first theme, the first statement. That was the statement of the beginning theme, and he states adagio molto semplice e cantabile, which means very slowly, well, slowly, molto semplice, very simply, and singing. So he's very specific with that. Now, what you'll hear in this first variation, so what you heard was the theme, and we can revisit that as I see necessary. But so what you get within the first variation, I can play some of it for you here. So you hear the beginning theme, most of what you heard was so the first variation, well, this is still the aria. So in the first variation, he subdivides it because what you hear at the beginning with the theme, you hear it subdivided a bit into triplets, a triplet like structure. It gets pretty provocative as we get later, so I want to make, okay, I keep an eye on time. So that goes on. He has a certain development within that first variation as well. And the second variation, let's see, I will play it for you. Play you the beginning. So I can do that again. What's interesting is you're sort of experiencing a concentration or a condensing of what you heard, of the theme that you heard at the beginning. So it's becoming more and more concentrated from the theme to the first variation, and then now to the second variation. Let me just try that and play that again. So going back to the beginning. To the first variation. To the second variation. So you follow. You're following just this the sort of intensification, and that unfolds into this. It's a beautiful movement. I encourage everybody that can work on it to work on it, or to listen to it in as a totality at some point very soon, maybe right after this presentation. So, okay, the third variation is very tricky. How Beethoven marks the first two variations as dolce, which is singing, or sweetly, I'm sorry, not cantabile singing. Dolce is sweetly, and sempre ligato, which is always connected, always, you hear the connected quality where it's always together, it's always tied together. And he marks these movements as lo stesso tempo, which is the same tempo, meaning the same tempo as the beginning. So that is a constant throughout at least these three, variations. So the third one is pretty wild. The demand technically on within late Beethoven, if anybody plays a stringed instrument and is familiar with the grosse fuga, it really, what I said before about getting outside the senses and getting into a domain of a transcendental nature is that string quartet. But there's a demand on the minds of performers to really communicate this as a unified whole. And the challenges that I see that many artists don't meet is they somehow compartmentalize everything. It doesn't hold together as a one. There's this part and then it's this other part, but it's what is the generative principle? There's a generative principle within our lives, within the scope of the entire universe, the evolution of the universe, the evolution of our species. What is the generative principle of a composition, an artistic composition of any sort, whether it be poetry, the fine arts, or classic or music. Okay, so this is the third variation. This is going to be fun. So you get it's even more intense, and it's quite joyous. The beginning theme was profoundly beautiful. But Beethoven just kind of lets it go here, and so he concentrates the rhythm. He goes from this to whoops, sorry. This is quite joyful for anybody that has a opportunity to hear it and really experience what's happening. But you see how the fiery temperament that Beethoven describes himself as in the Heiligenstadt Testament, you see it here. You hear it here. But you might be wondering, it's very rhythmic. If you really think about what I meant at the beginning, meaning Beethoven was a visionary. He was, Lyndon LaRouche was a visionary in terms of the question of physical economics and human economics. You have a visionary here what is a visionary? A visionary does something that's never been done before, that doesn't even exist. They introduce something that's never existed. This kind of passage doesn't exist anywhere in any compositions that I can think of before Beethoven, not even in Bach, Mozart, Haydn. Maybe no, I can't recall. But this is completely outside of the scope of what was normal at the time. And that is the kind of identity we need today, the kind of people that will think in a revolutionary way and say, to hell with popular opinion, I'm going to do what is inside my soul. I'm going to give what's inside my soul. And this is an example of that, where popular opinion doesn't matter. Just on an off comment, like people that nowadays they always look for validation in how many clicks they get on Twitter or on YouTube or on their social media, and this is completely outside of that. This is part of Beethoven identifying himself as a part of history, that is not just the mark that he wants to make, but this is his contribution, something which is revolutionary, which has never been done before. So if you put yourself in the time of Beethoven, he was alone. The leadership, it can be lonely. If you think about already the state of kind of isolation he was in because of his hearing, but then also just because of his fiery temperament, his impassioned identity to constantly seek and fulfill things that just never existed, and allow himself to be a vehicle, a creative vehicle for that. And that takes a lot, that takes courage, and it takes a devotion to truth, which Beethoven has. So that's the amazing third variation. So do you hear the aria or arietta in that? It's sort of elevating itself outside of just but I assure you that does come back later in a different form. So the third variation, I'm sorry, I'm trying to think about, okay, I have a whole mass here for you. So I'm going to get into the next part, which I really wouldn't call a variation. Many people say that there were 5 or 6, 7 variations within this. After this third variation, we really dive into something of a completely different nature. But let me get into that. This is still this is the end of the third variation, although I'm not going to play it quite as fast. That alone right there leads into, sorry. Oops. Shit. Quite different. Beethoven stays within the lower register of the keyboard, which gives it's a darker quality, and hopefully you heard it's sort of like a deconstruction of the original theme, which you heard, so you'll hear this, the pulses. So you hear it's deconstructed. It's the theme now comes in like a series of sighs. I've heard it described as sighs. I think it's probably the best way to describe it, because it doesn't come on the beat. It comes in between. It comes off beat. And the characteristic of it, while you have this timpani, like lower, like a little bit of a rumbling, but it's marked as double pianissimo. So let me just play that again, and then I'm going to continue on for a bit. Listen to the theme. So that's this is stuff like the heavens. He just as soon as he's done stating the theme in a deconstructed way, he has marked here leggermente, which is lightly, with a slight crescendo and then a sudden double pianissimo, right where you feel like you're entering the heavens. And you heard what continues. So this is just a directed exploration, and I'll play where I just left off, because anyway, I'll play where we left off and then I'll continue. So again, he returns after this exploration of the heavens. He returns to the lower tonalities. You hear these sighs, these off rhythm sighs, again as a deconstructed remembrance of the theme. Okay, so I'll bring out my big map here. I had to do this because the page turns are at very inopportune times. So hopefully I can read this and remember. So I'll just pick up where I left off, because then he moves, these passages weave right into one another. So this again is the lower part of the keyboard, and this deconstructed sigh of the theme. So you heard when he left the lower tonalities, again, he resurfaced into this heavenly exploration. Oh, sorry. And it just unfolds. And then this moment to me, it's just so beautiful. Just something so simple that you think when he just moves from one octave to a lower octave, the impact that has, and the colors that you get from that experience is truly human. So then you heard this. So this is where it's even it's just a leap. So people may be familiar with an element, a compositional element, the trill. When you're constantly vacillating between two pitches, which really is it's a very unique. Well, Beethoven uses it so uniquely, for lack of a better word. But he uses it so specifically, and the trill here really is not ornamental as it is in many other compositions, even earlier compositions of Beethoven, but it's not ornamental. It's part of the composition. It's an existential part of the composition. And so let's just see where he takes this. And I'll come back with you. So this is yeah, okay. This is the trill, the introduction of the trill. Here. This has also never been done before, where there are 3 simultaneous trills going at the same time. So you hear simultaneously. So your fingers start to get really happy here. they better be pretty buoyant and happy. And so I needed to state that because nobody else, no other composer that I've played, maybe other people know that are on the call that have never done this before. So I'll continue this time after you hear the 3 simultaneous trills. A glorious part of the movement, where you have this succession of trills that really take you through this process, and you get the expanse when he brings in the bass tones. So let me just do that again for you. It seems almost as if it's a certain resolution in Beethoven's mind, at least momentarily, of this question of life and death, what the in-between means. He has the extremities of the heights of the high and the depths of the low at the same time, and it comes to a really beautiful state of existence here, which we just came to, and he marks it espressivo when he comes out of the heavens. Sorry. Oh, okay. Sorry. Something's strange. So that is a glorious part where you really do hear, again, in the espressivo section, the deconstructed theme. And then the left hand. Now, the section that I just came to, really what happens when he ends up in the pure key of C major for some time, right here. Okay, this is so you hear the. And at the same time, there's such an intensity of action underneath it. Okay, so I'm going to move forward because we're getting into the question and answer period, and I definitely need to get to the momentary resolution here, which will be our joy. Okay, so that continues, that where you hear, and that kind of element continues to go on. And then this is right before really the coda or the ending section of this sonata, which would be Beethoven's final sonata. So I'll just lead into it where I see fit here. so that's what Beethoven has to say. Yeah, that was, we can go back through some of it, but why don't I open it up for questions or comments or whatever people may have.